Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this, welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya, and welcome to episode 125. This week's episode will be a review of season 1 of Creature Commandos, because we do know that Creature Commandos has been renewed for a second season. And as a fellow DC cartoon aficionado, I am rejoined by Dylan Pollock of Movies to Watch Before You Die. Dylan, welcome back to the show.
Kyle, what a well-oiled machine this podcast is. The way you just introed that, I am absolutely in awe of your talent, your ability, and I wish that I could just get Gab to do it that well.
You know what? Here's the thing. If Gab didn't need to take weeks off, maybe you guys would be on my level. I mean, it's congratulations are due. You guys did just reach episode 100, and in typical Movies to Watch Before You Die fashion, did nothing special for it.
No, we do nothing special for each episode. Each episode, we will discuss a movie, and we will generally, that's about it. I think the most special thing we've done in recent history that I can think of is during Jingle All the Way when we started discussing toys and then got a toy follow-up from you.
That's true. I appreciate that. What I love so much about that with my presence on Movies to Watch Before You Die. And if you're listening to this and not listening to Movies Watch Before You Die, thoroughly enjoy it. I've been welcomed on the show multiple times. So I had a rant about how we were getting the birth of the DC universe. It's new. It's exciting. Oh, wait a minute. This is just a sequel to The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker.
I thought Congress put a stop to all Task Force X activities since your daughter outed you.
Technically, Congress said Argus can't use incarcerated human beings as mission operatives any longer. But what about beings that aren't human?
Huh? What in the holy hell?
This is the Belle Reeve Non-Human Interment Division.
I'm not going to do that again. We've had 7 episodes, about 3.5 hours to get to know our new cast of Creature Commandos. You and I are fans of DC, specifically DC animation, of course. How did you feel about this first season of Creature Commandos, Dylan?
I'm also not going to rant, but briefly going to say, we've also been told like 4 times now that this is the start of something new. Blue Beetle, guys, this is the start of something new. Guys, I'm telling you, The Flash is starting a whole new thing. Creature Commando, no, this one for real, it's starting a new thing. Either way, I feel like once we get to Superman, the new thing is actually starting. But to talk about Creature Commandos, I feel like, James Gunn, superhero-wise, does not miss. And I feel if I'm just giving my overall summation, if this is what you're giving me for the Creature Commandos, I'm very excited to see what he does with the top tier DC heroes. You know what I mean? Because just like Guardians of the Galaxy, just like the actual Suicide Squad, I had a really good time watching this. It rides such a fine line of it's a well-edited thing that I'm like, this could be longer. You know what I mean? Which it's always a better thing if I'm saying, oh, I wish you'd given me even more than when I say, why was each episode of this an hour? It didn't need to be, that type of thing. Overall, though, I really enjoyed every one of the characters, and I really enjoyed as it got to the point where I realized that each episode is character-based, that I was like, oh, cool, now I'm going to find out about this guy. You know what I mean?
I think that's a really great encapsulation. Jermaine, I know you're listening to this intently. Hi, buddy. That I've really enjoyed a lot of James Gunn's work in the comic book genre. Like, he's done a really great job of making these ragtag ensemble groups. Personally, I think he's been more successful with Marvel as of more recently, because I loved Guardians 1, wasn't a huge fan of Volume 2, loved Volume 3. I think it's my personal favorite of the Guardians trilogy. And then wasn't a huge fan of The Suicide Squad, particularly because it felt like a lot of the conventions and setups that we're used to with James were part of it without having the same emphasis of character, and the needle drops not necessarily adding anything to that storytelling, where they felt almost as crutches in that moment. And with Creature Commandos, the framework for telling a season-long arc, and there is a season-long arc, this is something that I think streaming really does suffer from, which is having good episodes, but also telling a whole season story that feels cohesive and not, well, we wrote a 6-hour movie and then we just sort of edited it at random points to not make good television, because this is still television. And the Creature Commandos, outside of really Rick Flag Sr., this does feel like we are exploring a new aspect of the DC Universe, period. I'm always a fan of the supernatural elements of any of the comic book worlds. Justice League Dark, in particular, is one of my favorite runs, specifically with Constantine and those characters in particular. But having this ragtag group and getting to really understand these characters, and with your sentiment that you expressed, I wholeheartedly agree. I was doing some quick watching of specific scenes before we started recording today, and I had that same feeling of, I wish this was longer, and that is a testament to how good the storytelling is. I will say, and this is probably more so where my criticism is going to fit in the non-spoilers, which is, I really appreciate how well we get to know each of the characters. But one criticism I do have is that while I understand it is much more compelling to empathize with somebody doing bad things because of their backstory, I don't think every episode is successful in making me feel emotional for those characters, because regardless of them being wronged, the slant of their decisions after that, or the teeter-totter from, well, this thing was done bad to me, how much rope do I have to go? With one character in particular, you went way too far. Like, yes, this one bad thing happened to you, and then you turned into a criminal mastermind and decided everything you did was justified afterwards. That bothered me also because more recently with the Penguin, we were given backstory to Oz, and I'm not sure if you did watch that,
Sure did.
but in that story, we never lost the fact that we are following a villain. He's not an antagonist to our particular character. Oz Cobb, in that interpretation of the character, is a villain, and he does heinous things for selfish reasons. And when we meet all of Task Force M, as they're discussed in this, I get that it is easier for audiences to accept people doing bad things when they have personally been wronged, but I got a little annoyed that every character kind of had that experience.
It sort of does the opposite of the Penguin, and this is the more cliche route, but it's cliche for a reason because it works, where it introduces us a team of bad guys, and then each one it says, but they're not as bad as you think they are, and here's why. Whereas the Penguin, and something I did end up liking about it, is he got worse and worse as that show went on, where by the end you were like, you disgust me. And I'm not going to spoil anything with that either because it's still relatively fresh. But yeah, this is, it's more cliche. And it's also another thing about, James Gunn. Every single Marvel or DC thing he's done so far has been a team of misfits come together and have to overcome their personal struggles to achieve a goal. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's the reason I'm more excited to see him do something outside of that, which Superman should be outside of that, even though he does have somewhat of a superhero team that seems to be in that. The main focus, Superman, does not really fall into that category. So it's another reason I'm excited to see what happens there. Even Peacemaker, it's not just Peacemaker, it was the whole team of guys. So it was, once again, by the end of the season, a team of misfits had to come together to overcome personal struggles.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because this show, it pitches itself as an ensemble, but watching it through in pieces and then in pieces again, you really do have kind of a main, like, two leads, I would argue, in this, with Rick Flag Sr. and the bride.
I
And
would agree.
obviously we get the other characters' backstories. And it, for one, I really enjoyed the fact that this does feel like a complete story. Like, from the beginning to the end, this story is concluded. The characters obviously are going to have room to grow and continue their journey throughout whatever James Gunn's going to put them through. And then we got teases of a larger universe without having to necessarily explain them, which was good. And there's going to be conversations. I've talked about it in mail. I know you and Scotty Cameron have talked about it in response to the mail segment of the podcast. So I don't want to talk about who's that Batman and whatever. And I'm glad that this show is able to successfully, and this is what I'm most looking forward to about James Gunn's DC universe, which is he has said he's not telling chapters of the same story to sort of fill everything out, where it's going to be, there's not some grand story I'm telling. It's people are going to tell their stories, and then eventually I'm going to tell a single story, whether that be a Justice League, some team up, whatever it may be. And that's going to be the focus of like an ensemble of the heroes. And with Creature Commandos, he really does succeed in doing that. I'm not going, well, what's going to happen with Batman after? Like, that's not the point, right? He's a character
Yeah,
that
I'd be shocked if the next Batman project picks up with, well, right after I stopped Dr. Phosphorus,
yeah.
Sorry, I feel like that's a spoiler in the non-spoiler section, but it really isn't spoiling anything, I promise. To get very speculative very quickly, and I'll do it very briefly because it's not what this is about. I just watched Reacher season 2. I feel like I'm super late on that. But
You
God,
can
with that
check out
guy
my
out,
review for it.
I will go back and listen to it because I loved watching Reacher just be a huge, hulking mass of a man is phenomenal. He kicks a car so hard that the airbag goes off, and it was just morsels of goodness of just big man do big man things. And I felt like watching it, I was like, he could be a good Batman. I would watch that guy do Batman things.
I like Alan Ritchson. Well, I mean, shout out to last week's episode because Reacher season 3 was on my most anticipated TV shows list of 2025. And so his build is definitely more absolute Batman to some degree. So, I mean, we at some point will know. I hate the fact that we're going to have to constantly be speculating until we have definitive answers, but we don't have to speculate on this though, Dylan. I think we've given enough of a general reaction to the show because the nitty gritty is really interesting with what actually happens in this show, what ringer, quite literally, the characters are put through. So we're going to jump into spoilers for Creature Commandos. So if you haven't watched it yet, it's okay. Time codes are always in the description for the episode, and you can jump into mail later, hear what's coming up next week. So we're going to jump into spoilers for Creature Commandos Season 1.
The bride is right. Wait until she dips under, then do it.
Do what?
Stab her.
Stab her?
Yeah, then come straight back and we'll go out the way we came in.
No. I don't know how to kill someone.
You shove the blade into her belly and twist. The water is yours. Home field advantage. She won't even see you coming.
So we talked about this in our very beginning, which was, it's new. And episode 1 is mostly set up for this show, where we get to see Rick Flag Sr. reacting to what happened with Rick Flag Jr. in The Suicide Squad, Rip Joel Kinnaman. And we do see substantial amounts of continuity being continued from that, which is the United States Congress actually decided to stop something from happening. Sorry, Dylan. And that Task Force X program is no longer allowed because of jeopardizing human lives. So Amanda Waller's like, well, I've got these freaks and horrible monsters that we're going to call Task Force M.
It definitely stretches the fact that, like, they're not humans. I'm like, at least 3 of these people are some form of human.
Humanoid, perhaps.
If I was a human, I'd be annoyed. Like, the bride, she's like, the bride's a human, and she's like, she's a corpse. And I'm like, corpses are still humans. Like,
okay, but
we have laws
so
on the books that you can't do things with corpses because of that reason.
But would she identify as like, she's technically human beings, right? Because she's different people put together. Well, this is not a joke, but the bride's pronouns, just based on quantity, could just be they, right? Like,
could be.
Like, quite literally. So, I don't know. I like the setup for this. The whole political aspect is always interesting to me. It's so funny to me that you look at stuff like, and I'm just going to throw it as hot garbage, but like the Star Wars prequels tried to have politics in kids' movies and so failed to make them interesting, where this is so obviously not that because it's adult, made for adults, but it's animation. And we are living in the best adult animation era, I would argue, ever, with stuff like this, Legend of Vox Machina, Invincible, Has Been Hotel. Like, it's great to be a grown up and have stuff that aimed at us. And the fact that the streaming services can provide mature content like this, and then the movies will be PG-13, as I'm like Superman likely will be. And all the setup for the characters is here. There's not really much to say about episode 1, so do you want to just jump into episode 2, really?
Yeah, I think you said everything that I would have said. The only thing that I would have kept saying is that, like, Dr. Phosphorus, that he's a human. Nina, she's clearly a human, but it doesn't matter.
Not
Nina doesn't have a
anymore.
cool name, does she?
No, she's a cool frog lady.
Yeah.
This is the James Gunn thing, right? Which is he takes characters you are so vaguely familiar with or you don't know at all, and continues to, because he can, in theory, do whatever he wants with them.
Yeah, like the Weasel is a character who has, like, I was Googling the Weasel earlier and I was like, what? He's John or Jack Monroe is his name, and he dresses up in a weasel suit and he's a sociopath. I'm like, that's way dumber than he's kind of cute, kind of freakish. Like in the Suicide Squad, I was so happy at the end that Weasel was alive. I was like, yeah, Weasel's gonna come back. And I can't believe they brought Weasel back. He's kind of adorable. I kind of love the Weasel.
I mean, his design in this is way cuter than it was in the Suicide Squad.
I kind of thought he was cute in the Suicide Squad. I don't know. I'd chill with the Weasel.
He's horrifying looking. And episode 2 starts the continuation that we discussed in non-spoilers, where we get backstory for a main character as the main story is happening kind of in the background, where Cersei, as they say in this, has threatened to kill the princess of Pokolistan, which is a insert random Middle Eastern country, because that's what we do in DC. We don't really use real countries, which I understand. And their job is to kill Cersei. And part of the world building I appreciate about this is establishing things we're all familiar with, but showing us they exist. Like Themyscira exists. We see Batman later on in the series. He exists. Interestingly enough, though, there's never a Superman reference.
They reference Metropolis, and
yes.
you see the Daily Planet behind the destruction when you see the destroyed world.
Yes. And then we see like a bunch of different corpses on spears, which is supposed to be
Superman's one of those.
Right. And it's like the debut of, and it's like he's on a spick or a spike.
Yeah, I find that ridiculous when people are like, oh my God, this is the first time we're looking at the DCU Batman. I'm like, it's a silhouette, people. That's not what this is. It's just a reference.
And also, they're in animation, like, just because, and I mean, we talked about this so very briefly, I guess, just because the Batman silhouette we see is like Jack, he's kind of the irony to me is this. He looks like if Batman the Animated Series started cutting carbs. Like, that guy's clearly built.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the Batman has to look like Alan Ritchson. It's like, no, there's a reason we see like next to nothing. Like, you don't know anything about his color palette. You don't know if he's wearing the undies. Like, it's just a Batman. Like, let's simmer down. I like the bride's backstory so much because outside of outside of G.I. Robot, she is such a victim of circumstance because of Eric Frankenstein, who is played so perfectly by David Harbour. And I mentioned this, I don't know if it made the episode, but I'll mention it to you because movies to watch before you die. In that he reminds, have you seen Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman?
Yes.
Okay. That Frankenstein's monster really reminds me of David Harbour's, where it's like outside, not because I think their intellect is on the same parallel, but the way in which these Frankensteins talk, where it's almost old English as opposed to like modern colloquialisms, I find really funny.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Although I do love also that we get a Frankenstein who references Titanic and When Harry Met Sally at different points.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to see David Harbour in live action as Frankenstein. I think he would be perfect. And if that is what they are talking about doing, I think a lot of these characters would work really well in live action as well. Although I think one of the nice things about the animation is there's a degree of violence that you get that you couldn't really pull off in live action in animation. Like, is it episode 2, the Dr. Phosphorus, Rick Flag senior fight?
Yes.
Or is that episode 1? I think that might be my favorite. Yeah, and I think that might be my favorite action sequence of
No,
this
it's
entire
one.
series.
It's one. It's one. Sorry.
So we definitely should have mentioned that when we're mentioning things, because I don't think
Yep.
it ever tops that. There are other great moments, but animation wise, it's glorious looking as, Fly's getting his arm burnt and he's breakdancing his way up when he falls on the ground. And like the two of them are just throwing each other around and it looks fantastic. Not that I'm an animation expert by any means, but it looked phenomenal. And where did I start off here? I was talking about Frankenstein, right?
Frankenstein, yes.
Yes. He is great. And getting to see in episode 2 the backstory more with Dr. Frankenstein is very cool as well. Um, it is a very weird incestuous thing that I guess was going on there with the bride and Dr. Frankenstein.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll all hop back because I think it is a good point of talking about the phosphorus Rick Flag fight. What I appreciate so much about that action sequence is it feels choreographed by people who actually understand like hand-to-hand combat. Like it wasn't characters' bodies moving in a way that wasn't necessarily plausible. Like you can do more extreme things because it's animation, but that level of realism still is maintained. Like you have crazy things happen in this show, such as two people being brought back to life, but that relationship between Victor Frankenstein and the bride, yes, incestuous in some degree, but what James Gunn is allowed to do because of the way that he's formatted these shows is we really get throughout the run of it inside all of the characters' heads. And the show is so much better for that because if you just gave us what the modern story is, I don't think the show works nearly as well.
Well, I think this show, we sort of referenced a season long story arc. I don't think the season long story arc is very strong. In fact, I think it's very, very thin. But that's just because it's really just the candy wrapper around the delicious chocolatey goodness that is our characters. And really, we get to get a good bite out of each character, really leaning hard into my snack based thing. Can you tell I didn't have dinner before we recorded? But
Do you want to stop and
I
order
do
a
think,
pizza? That's fine.
yeah, we can do that. Yeah, let's just
Okay.
stop. I do think we do such a good job of getting to know each character that I didn't really care if each episode moved the story forward that far or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, which is it bounces off what I was saying, which is the show does a good job of maintaining the pace of the main story, which because of the way that the show is set up, feels like the B story, right? The focus is the backstories of the characters because if you don't care about them, whether you hate them or you love them, you're not interested in whatever they're doing in terms of, and the first two episodes setting up like the fight with Cersei and why we should care that these characters are in peril. And the internet was abuzz with GI Robot. And while I liked GI Robot, I think he's very interesting and he's very funny. I love the fact that GI Robot kills Nazis because Nazis are the worst villains in real life and fiction of all time. And the fact that we have to talk about that whatsoever is super depressing.
Are we delving into episode 3?
Yeah.
Because episode 3, Cheers to the Tin Man, is by far my favorite episode of the season. I
Interesting.
love that character and the fact that he somewhat has emotions but doesn't have real desires. His only desire is his directive, which is to kill Nazis, which, as we've established, is great. And I hope that it really does stick as a meme, that little clip of, that's what a Nazi would say. Because I kept thinking about that, the moment I open up Twitter every day, I feel like I think about that at some point. I think in general, that character is so great. Seeing him with Sergeant Rock and the boys, as he refers to them, I love the moment where, since we are in full spoilers now, where Nina is holding his head in her hands after he has a great action sequence where he just destroys the Sons of Themyscira, which I would love to know how Cersei, recruited those guys. But
I mean,
she's
we know
holding
how. We
him.
see what she's wearing.
Was that all it took?
Probably.
Probably. But it's just this moment where he says, like, so glad I finally got to kill Nazis with friend Nina, just before he like shuts off. And I was like, oh God, I'm crying a little bit at Tin Man, aren't I? Like,
Well, they do a good job because that friendship, Nina, who is like, I mean, she's just the like amphibian man from Hellboy for all like that's right. It's the
the creature
of the
from the Black Lagoon. Yeah.
Yeah. in a squid suit. And that friendship that scene only works because of the legwork they take in developing that friendship, right? He keeps calling her friend Nina. At the end of episode 2, he finds her in the barbed wired bathtub.
Which it's nice that they put her in a bathtub because they knew that she couldn't breathe air, but surprising.
Yeah, I mean, she's wearing an aquatic, like a scuba suit reversed, right? With the water's trapped in it. She's a don't freeze me, Mr. Freeze. And that episode does a really good job of another thing, and I appreciate this, which is because we are getting, I'm going to call it an adjacent universe with the DC universe, we are getting to see glimpses of the different time periods throughout the universe, right? Like we get the whole Frankenstein arc, we get this World War II onward, right? We get the Will Magnus tease in there, the creator of the Metal Men, and then getting into modern society and seeing exactly how his character winds up there. Like we get to sort of, for the most part, see what led to all of our characters winding up being in Belle Reve, which then goes to your apparently favorite character from the Suicide Squad. We get the whole Weasel's backstory, which is the Weasel's just a moron. Like not everything that happens to the
He's
Weasel.
sweet.
Sure.
He's dog-like, quite frankly. He just wants to have friends. Would you see him play? It's much further down the line, but he's just playing with wolves at one point. He's just playing with kids. He likes the princess because she plays fetch with him. He's a very simple creature. Aren't we all? God damn it. Let the Weasel have his fun.
And partially responsible for the death of how many people? 8 kids?
Not 27. I don't know where they got that from. It's 8. And quite frankly, not his fault. Weasel was innocent.
No, it's not. Well, and that just like what the guy who was also killed there, likely a shotgun is in his vicinity, and his death would be obviously some form of burns. Like, did they do 0 to next to none of forensic analysis of that school?
They saw that thing, and just like the guy with the shotgun, were like, yeah, let's go with that.
Let's go with that.
Just shook their hands of it and said, that'll wrap this up easy. That thing's a murderer.
Well, and I understand a character like this who is so base instinct reliant, right? That's how this character Weasel does anything, right? It's out of love or joy or play, as you've established. I get his experience being one of horrible circumstances. Like that makes sense to me, right? And then what I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did was seeing how horrible yet misunderstood, but he still makes terrible decisions. Eric Frankenstein is in episode 5.
Yeah, episode 5 is really his episode, which I assume at some point, probably in season 2, he's going to have to officially join Task Force M.
Yeah.
Like, that's coming. Which we didn't really talk about it, and it's not talked about in the show either, but the first time we see him, he's like chilling on a yacht with ladies, and I'm like, I really want to know more about how he got there. Because that does not seem like that ever... Although people in this universe are used to metahumans and oddballs out there, so maybe it's more okay.
He probably bought Apple when it launched. Like, he's been slowly investing over time.
Yeah, maybe he's one of the world's richest men. Who knows?
Well, because we see he, like, throughout he's kind of following right? Because he's obsessed with his bride, as he says, where he's constantly hiring people. So clearly he's got funds, right? Because he's not your typical Frankenstein, as I said earlier, where he's like, duh. Like, no, he's speaking quite eloquently.
He throws a wad of cash to these helicopter pilots. Yeah, he's carrying stacks and he's talking a big talk with the ladies. You know what I mean? And, well, not flirting with ladies, just talking to them because they're in his vicinity.
Yes,
he wouldn't do that to the bride.
And his back and forth with Rick Flag Sr. I found so funny. And that's really where I went, I want more of this. But because of, obviously, what we learned with Clayface and that's the first real Batman thing in this that's more supernatural than anything we'd seen in the Dark Knight's universe, period, up until this point. And this is where I really felt in my rewatch what a fumble this part of the story was. So I want to dive into that right now, if that's okay, which is Cersei says that the princess, I'm going to mess up her name again, Ilana, is going to be responsible for World War III because she is power hungry, crazy person. and she was trying to do the world a favor because, I'd like to live on planet Earth as well. She is eventually
Yes.
captured and shows, this is where, and we talked about this already, shows foresight she had to Amanda Waller of all the heroes dead and the world burning and whatever. And then an expert is brought in to validate Cersei's. Are you somebody also who just calls her Cersei? Because I am.
Yes, it's like I haven't said it the whole time because I'm like, I know I'm just gonna say Cersei, so I'm just gonna keep putting Cersei out there because I feel like Cersei rolls off my tongue much better than going Cersei. I feel like I sound pompous going Cersei.
It's Leviosa, not Leviosa. And
I was in Barcelona talking to Cersei.
Barcelona.
Like, no, don't like it.
Me and Anthony Gaudi were in Barcelona.
Don't like it.
No, I don't like it either. And so it is revealed in this that Clayface at some point was playing McPherson.
Well, we know exactly when. Right after the Creature Commandos leave, when they get back, they talk to Dr. McPherson, who is Dr. McPherson, who vouches for Cersei actually being clairvoyant.
Yes.
It helps that I just watched it, like I said before we recorded again. Sure. But then we see by the end of the series, obviously we're in full spoilers now, that they are able to find that Clayface had visited the princess immediately after they left as well. So right then and there is when the swap must have been made because she had the foresight to think, well, they're going to try and find an expert if they're keeping Cersei alive.
Yeah, and then in the midst of this, Rick Flag thinks, well, they made up what the vision was of the future, so we can't kill her. And then in one scene, we see, they should have just shown us Clayface because we get like a screen reflection during that reveal when we see them see it in the finale.
Yeah, I don't know why they hide it at first, the idea that it's going to be Clayface, but I think that's just for the reveal of the bride putting it all together herself.
Yeah.
Because she really doesn't have Waller tell her. Frankenstein tries to tell her, and he doesn't get the chance. Rick Flag gets his back broken before he gets the chance. So it's really just a very thin plot of Cersei tells us in episode 2, she wants to destroy the world and take it over. She's right. Cersei was actually trying to be a good guy. Like, she's fully right. She said even the devil doesn't want to see the world burn. Sure. And by the end, we realize, oh, she was right the whole time.
Well, especially, we're jumping ahead. I think we can, I don't know. Do I want to jump ahead to it? No. So we get that whole Clayface element of 5. And then this is episode 6 is kind of where my heaviest criticism is for this, which is the Dr. Phosphorus. Blight from Batman Beyond. Never mind.
Well, it's funny because what are you saying that Dr. Phosphorus is stealing from Blight? Because Blight is originally stealing from Dr. Phosphorus, and it's
yes,
just
that's what I like about it.
Yeah,
it's all about when you saw it, right?
Yep.
And we get to see his origin story. He is wronged by mob boss Rupert Thorne, who is then responsible for Dr. Phosphorus becoming Dr. Phosphorus, and then Dr. Phosphorus takes it. So this is where, for me, okay, you can go so far as to kill the people responsible for the death of you or your family and attempted murder of you. And then he's like, or I could just be a crime boss. That went too far for me.
I think I totally get what you're saying. I think it justified him giving up and just giving into base desires. You know what I mean? Does it fully work? No, but not every one of these characters has to be unimpeachably perfect. And I think that would be ridiculous too. So yeah, he did just become a bad guy after all that happened, which is why I think the episode does a nice job of he's sort of imagining all this while he's like hiding out in this house and this little girl comes down, and it does give you an idea of like, is he going to kill this little girl? Because he says, I really wish you hadn't drawn attention to me. It looks like I'm smiling, but I promise you I'm not, that type of thing.
Which is bit that's throughout the whole show.
He does reference it 2 or 3 times, I think, this idea of like, yeah, it looks like I'm smiling, but I hate you, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think even in the last episode, he asks, did I sound sincere? Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
It does a good job of presenting a character who has sort of just given up and doesn't actually care anymore. I also just think animation-wise, this is a fun episode because we do a really cool job of seeing all these different mechanics of him burning things. Like, I think in this episode we get him melting bullets, him melting through faces, and I think maybe my favorite one of all is when he's holding a guy off the rooftop of a building and he burns through his ankles to drop him off the roof.
Is that on this episode? I feel like it is. Yeah,
Oh, it's
that
definitely
it
in that
is.
episode.
Yeah, well, and we get to see some of Gotham, right? Which is super cool.
Yeah, we
And
see
then
Dr. Phosphorus running Gotham for a bit there. A very
well,
short
and
period.
the whole dancing sequence is very entertaining, right?
It's
And we get
cute.
to
Like, I don't feel like it's what that character would do, but it's there
but
in his
it's
little
there.
pimp outfit.
Yeah, and this is where the Batman tease was that we referenced much earlier in the episode. And then the finale just goes, I'm gonna stab you in the heart, quite literally, with the only character that seemed like she had any redeeming qualities is going to be the one character from the team that dies.
Yeah, and the show goes pretty far out of its way to be like, no, trust me, she's the only good one. And she really is dead. But quite
Mhm.
frankly, she may be the only good one, but she is also by far the least least useful. Like they
Yeah.
say, like, well, she's very much that Aquaman stereotype of, but if we're ever in the water, just watch. And then once she's in the water, she totally fails at her task. I'm like, oh,
Well,
this
this
was
is
your one shot.
where some of the twists that I think actually is somewhat established, because we see when Nina is there, because the Creature Commandos crew are led by the Bride outside of everybody but Rick Flag because of his injury to go and kill Ilana, and the circumstances provided to them are that Nina has to be the one to go kill her. And when Nina does or attempts to kill her, Ilana kills her back. And when she comes out of the water after this murder, there's no sympathy, there's no nothing. Like, you just see like a crazy person, like in the
You
cracks starting to be revealed.
Yes, and you also very much get the moment of when she is mercilessly stabbing Nina, because she doesn't just stab her once, she stabs her like 20 times. You just get this
Mhm.
shot of her eyes where like the irises specifically are very much illuminated, and I'm like, oh, that's definitely a very crazy look. And it's also, I don't know, the show has little moments of being anime inspired, because I feel like, trying to think, is it right then after Nina dies that we just get this shot of the Bride where her eyes are just shaking. And I feel like that's something you see a lot in anime that you don't see in normal American animation,
Mhm.
and I really like that moment just for her devastation. And she says a line later of, when she does finally reveal that the twist is that there is no twist, that, she was the bad guy the whole time, that the Bride is like, I'm not even killing you because you're going to destroy the world. I'm going to kill you because you took the only good one of us. And like her only friend or something like that. And I feel it more in the moment where I just see that reaction than I even do in the Bride saying.
Oh yeah?
I think so. I think that moment where you just see her reacting to Nina failed and Nina's dead, when you just see, I don't want to call it a blank expression, but the devastated expression with the eyeballs just shaking, I think, I don't know, animation wise, I think that really evokes something. I thought it
Oh
did.
yeah. I'm just rewatching as we're talking. It's the pupil shake.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's a
vibrating.
better way of describing it than just the entire eyeball shaking.
I feel like the deaths as a part of the story don't feel like they're just there for shock and awe, right? They're a significant part of the framework of what the story they're trying to tell is, right? Like, the death of GI Robot establishes, like, no, literally, like, the robot guy it's possible that, so like, in terms of the threat, the level of the threat, right? And then the situation, they're put in a warlike situation, and good people don't always make it out of that, Nina being an example of that. And in order to survive this, the irony is, like, the Bride lets Nina in and feels that guilt and trauma from it happening, but it makes when she kills Ilana feel so rewarding, like, oh, the bad person did get got.
Yeah, and by the end of it, we sort of just get to a Wild West like quick draw scenario where she's like, I am gonna kill you. And like Alana has a chance to draw a gun, and she's just not gonna be nearly as quick as the Bride is.
Mhm.
Which I do like that apparently the Bride and Frankenstein have really good shooting abilities, I think is one of their superpowers, because during our episode 5, we get Frankenstein saying if he sees something with that shotgun, he just pulls the trigger and he's going to kill it. Like, he just knows he can. And the same thing with, they say at one point, like, the biggest threat is the Bride and I think Dr. Phosphorus after this is after, yeah, after GI Robot's been defeated, that's said at one point. And it's true. Those two are really the extreme threats. Like, Weasel does a number on Cersei, but it's really once Dr. Phosphorus comes up that he's like, oh, I'm the one who's going to finish you.
Yeah. Well, and then we have our post-credit sequence where we kind of get the setup of the new team and King Shark, another reference from the Suicide Squad. I didn't need, honestly, that to me, I was like, no, thank you.
Oh, I was very happy to see King Shark back. And do you want to say it or should I about who else is back?
Go ahead.
G.I. Robot is back, baby. I
As
was
a
very excited
Gundam.
about it.
Pretty much he's
Yes,
a Gundam now.
He is massively buffed up G.I. Robot. And I was like, yeah, he's been hitting the metal gym. Yeah, no, I was so happy for him. I also just feel so
Oh,
like
Dylan,
it's
you could have said he's been
what?
hitting the iron.
Oh, he's been pumping iron. It's not
Yeah.
meant to be like he doesn't make expressions, but the basic expression he has on his face when he opens his mouth while he's shooting Nazis, it just turns into such a smile. And I'm like, good for him. He's just living his best life right now, killing Nazis.
Little does he know he's probably going to have a chance to do that again. And then, did you watch the post-credit sequence?
Is that where we get introduced to the new heroes who are joining the Suicide Squad? What's the
No.
post-credit sequence? Because I did watch it.
We see Eric is
with
recovering
Frankenstein
again.
is alive. Yes.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I feel like maybe it gave me a little too much of like, oh, she just murdered Frankenstein, and oh, Rick Flag is dead, and then to pull both of those back, like Frankenstein, they shouldn't have shown him feel like he was fully dead. Maybe Flag, we can feel like he's fully dead, and you earn that him coming back. But I don't know. I did think for sure. I was like, oh, Rick Flag is dead when Clayface pulls the full Bane, I must break you on him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really entertaining show. I think if you're somebody who's looking for like all the breadcrumbs that are going to build to the larger DC universe, like sure, those can be fun at times, but that's not at all why this show works. It works as a mature, character-focused narrative that sure the main plot is probably not the most interesting and exciting and may not surprise you, but these are characters I enjoy and I want to see more from. Would it be interesting to see these characters in something more relevant to what's happening in the DC universe? I'm sure, but to have their own little pocket of it being weird, like I'm definitely going to be tuning in for season 2 whenever we get that.
I absolutely agree with that. I feel like the best thing about these types of characters, the Suicide Squad, Task Force M, Creature Commandos, even Guardians of the Galaxy, is that you're going to see them all facing something that you wouldn't see the Justice League face. Like, I don't want to see Task Force M fighting Brainiac. You know what I mean? I like that it's like, well, they're off doing the dirty work against somebody that, is not on the radar of the Justice League. But Amanda Waller,
like Felix Faust or something.
Yes, Felix Faust is the perfect example. Cersei's a great example too of like somebody who's a big enough pain in the ass that could draw Wonder Woman's attention, but oftentimes it's just going to be like, well, Waller saw that there's something going on over in Bialia or Kazania and was like, all right, send in the bunch of freaky misfit guys we got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. No, it's really entertaining. I highly recommend you checking it out because it is available now the whole season on whatever platform. It is also available for digital purchase. I did see on Apple TV you can just buy the season digitally. So if you want to own it digitally, I'm sure it's available on other streaming platforms as well. This week's question of the week was, what film in 2025 and what TV show in 2025 are you most excited for? Stephanie writes in, can't say I'm looking forward to The Last of Us Season 2 knowing some of the heartbreaking plot points, but I know it'll be phenomenal. Surprisingly interested to see The Gorge. I like the dark tone and hope it won't turn out being too cheesy. Dylan, how are you in more places at once? Shout out Batman Cape Crusader and me, LOL. Our number one most anticipated movies are the same, but no surprise there. Superman or bust. I don't think I have a particular anticipated series, but definitely looking forward to the conclusions of Cobra Kai and Stranger Things. Scotty Cameron, I appreciate the length of the note. We're almost in that sweet spot, Scotty. I love you, buddy. My most anticipated film of 2025 is Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, with it wrapping up this iteration of the Mission Impossible franchise. It's exciting to see the conclusion of Ethan Hunt's story and what lies in store for Mission Impossible in the future. Superman and Captain America Brave New World deserve shoutouts. Cap 4 is for introducing Red Hulk and the Serpent Society, and for wrapping up the leader plot thread from Incredible Hulk. Superman for being the first DCU film, and to see what James Gunn does with Superman. My most anticipated show is Invincible Season 3, to see the next chapter in the Invincible saga with the black and blue suit and Oliver becoming Kid Omni-Man, not to mention season 2 set the stage for the Invincible War and Conquest. I don't know what any of that means. Also, characters like Astounding Wolfman and Brit are coming to the 3rd season. Okay. Reacher season 3 and Daredevil Born Again deserve shoutouts as well. Reacher for giving Jack Reacher a foe bigger than him who will be a shadow from his past. Daredevil Born Again for basically being Daredevil season 4 and more Bullseye and Punisher. Scotty, I did read the thing about the Scoopers, but as I think we would agree, I don't even want to have them in the transcript as a platform. So I did read it, but I feel like it's not necessarily commenting on. So I appreciate the info on who these Scoopers are. And then Jermaine Jones writes in, Kyle Naranya, this is a great list, but I don't see Peacemaker 2 #shame. Well, I will be reviewing it in season 2, and then I can tell you why season 1 or why season 2 was not on my anticipated list because of my feelings of season 1, but you're going to have to wait until that comes out. Thanks so much for everybody who answered last week's question of the week. This week's question of the week is, of course, DC/Creature Commandos related. We know that with the DC universe moving forward, anybody who signs up to voice a character in animation will be playing that version in live action. So as opposed to what project would you like to see a Creature Commandos character in, I want to know of the main cast, if you could get a solo series or an individual movie, which character would you like to see in that project? So to let me know, you can comment on the social media for the episode, which is mainly on YouTube or Spotify. You can answer there directly. You can tag Film Realist on any of the social media platforms and make sure to put in #QOTW, or you can email the podcast directly, filmrealistpod@gmail.com. Dylan, thank you so much for coming back on. I hope before I have you on again, because we've already cards on the table. We have discussed what my next episode will be on Movies to Watch Before You Die.
We have.
have.
I will say also, Kyle, I just want to put this in there. I'm just going to give you a soundbite right now that I want you to put after the worst answer, what you feel is your least favorite answer of next week's question of the week. That's what a Nazi would say.
Perfect. I will do
throw
that.
at somebody.
I will clip in. I will throw it in. Yes. So Dylan is the co-host of Movies to Watch Before You Die, the bi-weekly podcast that looks at movies from your youth or sometimes some modern hits. And him and Gab decide if it's worth watching before you die. It is a fairly illustrious list. I've been lucky enough to be on the podcast 4 times, and I believe 2 of my movies have made the list, so I'm 50-50 right now. I'm still mad over Mask of Zorro. I'm shocked by I'm shocked by what has made the list, but you can check out that podcast on every podcast platform. If you loved the show, I'm trying to get movie critic accreditation. So if you are listening on an Apple device, please consider giving the podcast a 5-star rating and write whatever review you feel like. I'll take any constructive criticism to always benefit the show and make it better. If you are listening on any other of the platforms, please make sure to follow and leave a rating if possible. That would be absolutely amazing. Next week's episode will be a review of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. So it is the Goonies meets Star Wars. Let's find out if it wrapped up better than it started. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I will see you next time.